Hey, welcome to my next re-recorded tutorial. Today we will gonna have a look at how to create a terraces generator, as you can see here. And we will be starting with Blender 3.4, the newest Blender version alpha. You can download it via the blender.com website or via the Blender launcher. And then we can quickly just launch it. This will be my first tutorial recorded with my new mic. You can write in the comments if the sound is better. It should be better. Until now I recorded all of my tutorials with a very crappy mic, and now the sound should be way better. You could tell me in the comments if you like the sound more. So let's get started. We will at first delete everything, and we will be starting with a plane. Want to scale it like this, just a little bit up, and then we will go to here and we want to go into the geometry nodes editor, and I want to create a new node tree to work with, because now I want to create the ground displacement for our environment, and we can do it very easily. The position of an object, we can always change the position or the displacement of an object via the set position node, and you can add a new node by pressing Shift and A, and then you go into the add menu, and here you can add in the geometry submenu the set position node, and with this node you can say what vertices should have a certain position. And now with this we can now add a texture to our plane. But at first we don't have enough geometry here. We have to subdivide our plane. We can do this by just grabbing in the mesh category the subdivide mesh, and let's just drag it up to 6. We want to have a nice terraces displacement here that should be going upwards, and we can just do it by using a texture, an Voronoi texture, and we can use the position into the offset. And by doing this you can see it's not really working, but that is because we have to change the type to Minkowski, and we have to do something else. We have to use a gradient so that this thing is going upwards. So for that we use another texture, the gradient texture node, and just plug it in here. And now you can see it's kind of working, but it's very distorted. This is because we use this texture for every single axis. We don't want this. We only want to have the z-axis displaced. So for this we use the combine XYZ node. So just search it. I'm not exactly sure under what submenu this node is. And now you can see, yeah, it's working. It's a little bit jagged out, but that is because we have to higher up the resolution a little bit, and then we can play with the exponent value here. So then this thing gets cleaner like this, and we can also change the viewport so you can see it better. And now we have our base structure. If you want to change the height of this, you can just grab a map range node, map range, just type it into the search, and here you can disable the clamping, and then you can play around with the max or the min values, define your height. I personally don't want it to be that high. And now we have our ground structure. I think we will use an 8 for the resolution, like this. And now we can move on with the moss. How can we add moss? It's also very simple. We just have to distribute points on our objects, but only on these platforms here. We don't want to have them on the sides here. We will be using the normal for this. And then we will turn these points into volume, and then we will convert the volume to a mesh. And this way we can create kind of mossy structures. And without further ado, let's go into action. So we want to distribute points on our mesh. So we will go into the points submenu, distribute points on faces. Just plug it in here. And then we can higher up the distribution. If it's too laggy, just lower the resolution here. And then it should be working. But now you can see it is distributed all over our mesh, but we only want to have it on the upper platforms. How can we do this? We have a concept here that is called fields. So we can change the position on every face. And so we need a selection for all the faces that are platforms. And we can do this very easily. We just have to grab the normal, which defines in which direction every face is looking. And then we have to use all the normals that go into the Z direction. And we can do this with an separate XYZ node. What's that for a bug? Now my mouse is strange. Now it's alright. As said, we are in the Blender 3.4 version, so bugs can occur. And so we have to live with that. It's still experimental, so no problem. Now we can separate our normal in the X, Y, and Z direction, but we only want to have the C direction because that is where our platforms are facing. And we drag the Z into the density, but unfortunately the Z goes only from 0 to 1. So we have to grab a math node to multiply the whole thing by a certain amount. And now you can see, not really, but I know that those are only on the platforms, and we can confirm that by using a join geometry node. And we can look at it. And now you can see those are only on the platforms. If we disable it, you can tell the difference. Those points are currently very big, but that doesn't matter because now we want to convert our points to volume. So we can do this by points to volume like this. And this is obviously way too big. We just have to lower the radius by a certain amount, and then we grab a volume to mesh node like this. And of course we have to higher up the voxel amount so we can see everything. And now we can see we don't have enough points, so let me just lower down the voxel amount. And we can add more points here. And now we can see we also have some points here on the walls. We don't want that. So we just grab a color ramp and we will higher up the contrast of our output here of the Z normal. Just play around here, clamp that a little bit. And now you can see it's working very great. Now we have a stylized moss. Now we want to add grass on top of our moss. And we can do that by distributing points on our moss and then replacing it by curves. And we can bend those curves and convert them to a mesh to have a nice grass effect. And we can even animate them as you saw in my video at the beginning. And so we grab another point, distribute points on faces node, and we just grab our volume to mesh output because this is the moss. And now we have the viewer in the newest Blender Alpha, so we can now watch certain things here, which is very great. And we can use that in the future. So we just distribute points on our moss. And now I want to have an instance on points node. And I want to have a curve primitive, a curve line instanced. like this. This should be our grass. And now we can first of all scale our grass a little bit down so we don't have it that high. Now we want to have those grass strains a little bit bent. First of all, let's join it with the rest so we can see what we're doing. First of all, I want to have more resolution in our grass because the curved line only has 2 points, the start and the end point. I want to have more points in the middle. So we go into the curve submenu and we grab the resample curve node. And I want to have maybe 4 to 5 steps. Not that much because we want to have our viewport that laggy. Now we want to change the position of our curve. So we grab another set position node to bend our curve. How can we do this? We can grab a position input and plug it into the position of our set position node. And we can, with a vector rotate node, we can rotate or bend our curve. It should be located in the vector submenu, vector rotate. Here we go. And now we can use the length of our curve to define how much it is rotated. So it bends over like that. So we can get the length in the curve submenu. It should be the spline parameter and the factor. This is the length of our curve. And now it isn't working because it uses the Z direction. We want to have another direction. So just change that. And I want to have it curved in this direction. And now we can use a math node to define how much it should be bent over. I want to have it not that much because it would be unrealistic. And now we can work with that. Maybe to have less resolution so we don't have it that laggy for tutorial purposes. But at home, if your computer handles it, you can higher up the resolution here if you need it. Also for the resolution of our voxels here, you can do this by your own. It's all procedural, so you can change everything on the fly. And now, of course, if we want to have more grass, just higher it up here. But as said, for tutorial purposes, I wouldn't change it here. You can change that if you want to. And now we want to change the rotation of our grass with a noise texture that will be moved over time. So it looks like our grass has some wind. So we will use a noise texture on our rotation, but only on the Z rotation. So we will grab a combine XYZ node like this. And I want to change, let's change the X-axis. And then we will be moving our noise texture by using our position here and just plugging it into the vector. And we want to add with the vector math node, we want to add it in one direction like this. So it looks like those are animated, and we can do this by using another combine XYZ node to separate our vector here. So we want to use just the Y direction, and we can animate it with a scene time node. So just search for it, and we want to use the second into the X. And now you can see it looks like there's some wind. Let's maybe change the speed of our time, maybe 0.3. Now it's not that strong. And let's change the overall strength of our noise texture, maybe by 0.7, like this. So we have a little bit a subtle breeze. And now we have our grass, but you can't see curves in the rendered mode. So we have to convert our curves of our grass to a mesh. And we can do this in the curve submenu, convert curve to a mesh with the node. And we have to define a profile curve, and we can just use a curve line plug it into the profile curve. And as you can see, it's a little bit big. So just play around with these settings here. I will use the X direction, so 0.001 maybe. Is that working? Yeah, I think that's fine. Maybe 0.002. And I want to have our grass to get smaller the further you go on our curve. How can we do this? We already have a node for the length of our curve. We've used it by bending our grass here, the spline parameter. So just use that. We have to define our curve radius. So just grab in the curve submenu, set curve radius node and plug it before the curve to mesh node. And we want to use the factor into the radius. And of course, it's the wrong way around. So just flip it with the map range node. Map range. So incoming are numbers from 1 to 0, and we want to have the 0 outputted as 1 and the 1 outputted as 0. So we just flip the output, and now we can see it's working. And as said, for you at home, you can just higher up the density of the grass, but for tutorial purposes, I will leave it at that resolution. And now we are basically ready with our geometry nodes workflow. Now, if we want to see a great result in the viewport, we just have to use materials, and we can just go into the materials menu here on the top right, on the bottom right, sorry, and just add 3 materials. The one will be called ground. The second I will call moss, and the third will be the grass material. And now we also have to assign different stages in our node tree to those materials. So here at the beginning we have created our ground. So we will be using our material set material node and plug it into here. So we have the ground material on our ground. After that, we've created our moss. So we will be using just duplicate it. We will be using the moss material on our moss here. And at the end, we've created our grass. So we will be using our grass material on here. And now we can go into rendered mode, and you can go into shading, and here we can just play around with our colors. I will go into material preview so it looks a little bit better. And here we can play around with our settings. So maybe for the rock something like this, and then for the moss that should be obviously green, maybe something like this. And if you want to have the moss shaded smooth so you don't see that edges jagged out, then just have to navigate to our moss. And I will be using, so creating a reroute with pressing shift and then right click and drag. This way you create a reroute. We have a node for that in the mesh submenu, set shade smooth. Just plug it in here, and now this is shaded smooth, but for this tutorial I will leave it jagged out so it has this low poly feel to it. And the grass will be of course also green like this. And for tutorial purposes, because I don't have that much grass, I will be higher up thickness of our grass, maybe something like 0.007. And now this should be working. You can also assign a texture to the ground. So if you use a noise texture and just use a color ramp like this, you can plug it in here like so. Then we can use simply colors on here. So this way we can achieve other kind of effects. And this is basically the whole effect. If you want to have this file, I now will upload every file from every tutorial on my Gumroad into the product tutorial resources. You can just go under here, and then you can see here, and then you can click here on the terraces generator. Then you can enjoy the file on your own. It will be maybe a little bit more optimized, and it will look more realistic. And I will upload every file from every tutorial here. At the end of the day, there will be here a very long list, and then you can enjoy the files from my tutorials on your own. And yeah, thank you all for watching. I hope the sound quality is now way better, and have a great weekend. Thank you. See you later. Don't forget to subscribe.